Who Dat Nation, welcome into the Who Dat Confessional podcast. It is Thursday night, and surprisingly, there's a couple of big pieces of Saints news coming through here. So we're going to hit those pretty early. I don't want to make sure anybody forgets or misses, and who would want to miss Saints news? But the re-signing of the Honey Badger to a 2-year deal, definitely have to talk about that. The basically official report that Michael Thomas will be released, and more that we'll have to discuss. And obviously the Honey Badgers contract is also going to lower his cap number for this upcoming season. If you're curious, all the things that they do. Yeah, well, we're going to discuss all those things and more. Let's give a shout out to those who are here early here for the show. We appreciate y'all being loyal. We appreciate y'all being loving. And we appreciate y'all being here. Shout out to Mike. Good to see you. TJ Slade Smith at Gamma Waves, James Griffon, Max Azino, Mr. Jerry, Josiah Gilbert, the Pancake Astronaut, Solar Flares, Wayne S., which, by the way, bringing in a comment/question already early in the chat. Love it. Says, what y'all want about Mike T about to be the best receiver Saints ever had? Well, he is. That was already the thing. Like, regardless of what happens with him officially being released or not, he was already that. So, but that just opens the opportunity for somebody to come take that spot. I don't know anybody who could do that. No offense, Chris Olave, because 2019 Michael Thomas is the greatest wide receiver season I've ever seen. I'm biased, but 150 catches, like what the hell? Like that was, I mean, 149. But like, golly, and then he caught 80% of his targets. Like, it wasn't even like he got 200 targets. Like, that's what's crazy to me. The man didn't even get 200 targets. He just caught all the things. Like, when Calvin Johnson led the league in receptions back 2012, and they talked about him beating the receiving record, he was targeted over 200 times. Like, what? Michael Thomas was stupid. Sorry that everything's ending how it is and the injuries happen, but, man, there was a point where that man was just stupid. Just stupid good. Just stupid good. Like, dumb good. Randy Moss is better? I mean, sure. I don't know what that point was, Mike. Okay, cool. Yeah. Sure. Don't know what the point you were making was. I was like, Randy Moss was better. I mean, yeah, Randy Moss was Hall of Famer. Randy Moss also never had to miss like 3 seasons due to injury. Okay. He did retire for a season and came back to San Francisco for 1 year. But I don't know what the point you were making was. Sure. Yeah. He was better. Yes. Also Jerry Rice. Yes. Who that to you? Welcome in, everybody. I hope y'all are having a great day. Hope y'all are having a great Thursday. So let's start with Michael Thomas. Release kind of been made official, but not official. It does seem to be that the Michael Thomas camp doesn't really I don't want to use the word understand. They're intelligent people. But the way that the agent has come out and said is that, he's going to be a free agent no matter what, whereas the way New Orleans creates contracts and creates phantom void years and everything, he does have to be released. Like, he has to actually be, you could technically call it cut. But you'll probably see Michael Thomas in a new uniform. I'm very curious if he goes over to Denver. I'm very curious if a team like Kansas City gives him a look, if he's willing to take like a very low deal. I'm very curious to see what ends up happening with Michael Thomas. And we'll cover it here on the podcast because just like we covered the departure and then the hiring of Sean Payton, well, we're going to do the same thing, Michael Thomas. So last year, I think he had a solid year, right? He only played in 10 games, but at 450 yards receiving, got him a tutty. Definitely seemed like he was healthier, and that was, you saw Michael Thomas play with the lesser version of Derek Carr, and then the better version of Derek Carr, the better version of play calling, the better version of everything started happening in the second half of the season. So I'm curious where he ends up. But all that said, the era is over. And we knew that kind of coming in. Now it's kind of being more official. Jed Duncan's talking about it and the agents making comments. And I think a lot of this, I'll be honest, from the agent side of things is just to go ahead and get the name in the news cycle. If I'm just being real, I mean, because that's a real thing, man. A lot of times things will get brought up that have no need to get brought up, but you want to have your name in the news cycle leading up, right? It's, again, like, I don't really think that anybody was confused in New Orleans about what was happening, but I do think that if you're his agent, you definitely want to get as many irons in the fire as possible. And Antonio says the official release has not yet happened, but I mean it's kind of like it's considered a foregone conclusion right now, where we expect to see him available. And for New Orleans, it really just comes down to when do they decide to officially release it? Like, do they designate it as a post June 1st cut, or are they going to do it immediately here at the start of the new league year? How's the void going to play out? And we'll watch it. But the big thing, I think, honestly, is more of getting things in the news cycle. Like, I don't think it's shocking, and hopefully nobody in the podcast era that, or the podcast, listening audience, or at least for us, is shocked by this. I think most of us knew Michael Thomas was going to be gone, and it ended how it ended. But I think just getting his name out there is kind of a tactic being used, because truly, like, who really thought he was going to be back with New Orleans in 2024? Now, King T says, is Mike T the best Saint receiver ever? I mean, yes. And honestly, it's not even a close argument. Like, I realize that fans of the past, the New Orleans Saints for the past 2 years want to love on Marcus Colston. Marcus Colston was nowhere near as talented as Michael Thomas. Was Marcus Colston great? Oh, of course. Marcus Colston is an all-time New Orleans Saints great. And that'll never be taken from it, nor will we ever besmirch his name. But was he ever near as good as Michael Thomas? Also, no, at the same time. All right, like, Michael Thomas never took a backseat to anybody, in his quote-unquote prime. Marcus Colston did. Michael Thomas is hands down. And look, I've said this before, and not everybody likes this. Marquez Colston is number 3, number 4 on my wide receiver chart for New Orleans, right? Like, I would put Joe Horn above Marquez Colston. I would put Eric Martin probably above Marcus Colston. But that's just me. Michael Thomas is head and shoulders above everybody else that's been a New Orleans Saints wide receiver. That doesn't mean that Colston was bad. Colston was incredible. Colston was definitely more, what's a polite word? He was more placid as a locker room presence, right? He was definitely more of a laissez-faire, take things how they come. He wasn't as boisterous as Michael Thomas is, right? And statistically, Colston's still going to be the Saints' best receiver, because Michael Thomas is leaving with like 3,000 less receiving yards and like half the touchdowns. Well, missing 3 seasons will do that. And I mean, technically 3.5 if you count this past season. But yeah, I mean, in terms of talent, I don't think there's any question that MT was better. Now, Cody says MT's not a better Saints receiver than Quiet Storm. As somebody who literally studied tape on both of them for both school and professional, it's not even close that Michael Thomas was better. And that's not even an affront to a Quiet Storm. Like, it's the difference between a 2018, 2019 Michael Thomas is you're talking about a guy who is arguably the best player at his position in the entire league and who is on a Hall of Fame trajectory. And then Colston is an all-time team great. The best way I can honestly give you the best thing I can say here's a good comparison is to compare like Devin Hester, who's a Hall of Fame level special teamer, to like your favorite Saints returner of all time, whether that be Beerman, whether it even be Darren Sproles, whether that be Courtney Roby, whatever. There's a team great level guy, and then there's a guy who literally is playing at a different level at the NFL level. And that's what Thomas was doing. Colston never did that. Doesn't mean Colston was bad. He's just a team great level player. Thomas was, for a couple years, right at there, the best at the position in the entire NFL. And that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, if you were going to build a dream receiver for this team, Michael Thomas is the guy in your West Coast offense, but Colston's obviously not a bad one, right? We like Colston more, and that's legit. Like, I mean, if you like him as a personality more, that's fine. But I definitely don't want to disrespect Thomas as a player, because he is the best receiver this team's ever had. But that is what it is, right? Like, it ends how that is. It's a reason he was the offensive player of the year, right? There's a reason he was multiple-time All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler in that 3-year stretch. I mean, I was ridiculously good. But hopefully New Orleans can get that back one day by another guy. So Mike says good riddance, right? I don't think he was a cancer in the locker room, but I understand why people get frustrated. And I said this before, right? You know what cures all this? You know when you're okay with personalities like Michael Thomas? When you're winning football games. When you're winning football games, you care less about those personalities. Josiah says Colston was consistent for a longer time. Yeah, I mean, whatever reason you want to blame it, Thomas missed 3 years. I mean, hell, you can blame Sean Payton if you want to about him being out there on a pointless play, blocking in the fourth quarter on a pointless play that ruined the best receiver in the NFL's career. Sure, whatever you want to do. I mean, if you value a guy for being long-term, though, that's like saying Gore is a better running back than somebody like Derrick Henry because he lasted in the league like 20 years. Like Frank Gore's fine. Frank Gore is nowhere near the level of player. Like if you're picking a player to have on your roster, who you taking? Frank Gore or Derrick Henry? Like it looks like Derrick Henry's already coming to the end of his career. He's not even made it a decade. It's like he's already starting to head that way. Now, he had another 1,000-yard season, but you can definitely tell that the peak is over. Like he's on the downswing. He's not going to make an Al Gore level, career. No offense to Derrick Henry. Maybe he proves that wrong. But Al Gore. I keep saying Al Gore. I don't know why I keep saying that. Frank Gore. But Frank Gore's in the league like literally 16, 17 years as a running back. It's unheard of. He literally ended his career with 16,000 rushing yards. But not a single one of them daggum seasons was he the best running back in the NFL. You could maybe argue the 2006 year he was up there. But I mean, he made the Pro Bowl. He was good. Same thing, though. You can be a team great. Like, to me, Frank Gore should go in, like, the San Francisco Ring of Honor as one of their best running backs of all time with guys like Roger Craig and everything. But was he Derrick Henry? No. Like, was he LaDainian Tomlinson? No. But he still deserves love and respect for different reasons. The fact that the man had a 16-year NFL career as a running back is insane. He was 37 years old his final season and still rushed for over 600 yards. Like what Frank Gore did is insane. Shout out to the man. But I guess it just depends on what you rank guys on. I mean, if you think that longevity has more valuable than in-season like contribution, that's cool. That's completely cool. So, but I think for me, and what a lot of people are going to do, if you're going to grade a player, you grade them by their peak. Michael Thomas's peak is significantly higher than Colston's peak. Significantly higher. But if you have more value in longevity, by that argument, Joe Horn's the best wide receiver the Saints have ever had. Like, if that's the argument, Joe Horn's the best. Joe Horn had more years of successful, consistent play, had more awards in terms of consistent, successful play. Then you put Joe Horn up there as number one. Because he had 7 years in New Orleans and 4 Pro Bowls. If you want to talk about consistency, and he had the worst quarterback of all 3 of them. No offense, Aaron Brooks, but you're not Drew Brees. I mean, if we want to go with the longevity and peak talent, then Joe Horn is now your number one. It's still not Colston. So it depends on how you want to grade your scale. Make your scale however you want to. To me, Thomas is hands down the best receiver the New Orleans Saints have ever had because he's the best person I've ever seen best wide receiver on tape I've ever seen in a black and gold uniform. But it depends on what you want to grade things as, right? Don says Frank Gore was splitting carries with Kevin Barlow at one time. That feels like it was 25 years ago. Don, craziness. It almost was 20 years ago. That's what's crazy about Frank Gore. And again, I think Frank Gore deserves to go into the Hall of Fame. I'll be very clear. I do think he deserves to go in the Hall of Fame. But it comes down to like how you like value a player. I think he deserves to go in there because he's unique. The fact that he managed to be a starter caliber running back for over 15 years, even though he was never the best running back in the NFL. Not a single year was he the best running back in the NFL. But just the fact that he was there for 16 years as a starter should make him go to the Hall of Fame because that is insane for a position where the average life of a running back in the NFL is 4 years. Nuts. He went 4 times as long as the average running back makes it in the NFL. Absolutely crazy. But even in his best season, statistically, he was not the best running back. Like, and even his best year, he's not the best running back. To give you a reminder, or like to point out who the best running back of that season was, LaDainian Tomlinson and Larry Johnson with Kansas City were the All-Pros that year. LaDainian Tomlinson, in the year that Frank Gore had his best season, Frank Gore's best season was 1,600 yards rushing and 8 TDs. In that same season, LaDainian Tomlinson rushed for 1,800 yards and 28 rushing touchdowns. That was the year that LT went stupid. So, I mean, even if you took that out, though, like even if you took LT being stupid out of the equation, Larry Johnson still rushed for right at 1,800 yards and 17 TDs. Like, we forget about Larry Johnson's 2006 season because LaDainian Tomlinson just went nuts. But, yeah, even Frank Gore, I think, is a great representation of, like, we're talking, like, the difference in talent. Like, Michael Thomas was a LaDainian Tomlinson-type talent. Frank Gore is a Colston type talent. Like, he's amazing and consistent, but he doesn't have the peaks. Cody says, I don't think MT sniffs Colston's statistical jockstrap. Well, again, it depends on what you want to value things. Because for me, my upbringing or my training or whatever you want to call it comes from building a team, scouting, player evaluation. So the way that I'm going to look at something is not from a stat sheet. I'm going to look at it from if I was building a roster, who would I rather have? And it's not even a close debate. I'd rather have Michael Thomas. It's not even close. Like if you told me build a team right now, Colston or Thomas, 100 times out of 100, I'm taking Michael Thomas. Colston's not even in consideration. No offense to Colston. But that's because I come from a very specific line of thought with scouting and player evaluation. You want me to build a West Coast offense? You tell me to pick the best wide receiver for it? Colston is not the one. Still love him. But if you value longevity, and I do think that there's legitimacy to that argument, cool. But I just need you to also say the same thing about everything else. I need you to also say Frank Gore is superior to LaDainian Tomlinson. And if you'll do that, then you win. Like I accept your viewpoint. If you say that, I accept your viewpoint. But what I have found is a lot of people won't accept that argument. If you're willing to accept that argument and you say, cool, I've got no argument with you, then we're not even at an impasse. There you go. So there you go. But again, it just depends on how you want to view it, right? Like, and I don't think there's a wrong answer. It's all opinion. But if you said you would take Frank Gore over LaDainian Tomlinson, you'd acknowledge most people wouldn't do that. Well, I wouldn't take Colston over Michael Thomas. So, but it's still the end of an era no matter how you cut it, right? Because we do have to figure out who's the option at split end now for the Saints. And not that I'm saying that A.T. Perry can't be that guy, but you definitely don't go into the season with A.T. Perry like set in stone. You definitely want to make sure that you're addressing the position and that there is competition, because you don't bank it all on a few good games by A.T. Perry, even though I really like A.T. Perry. So, Josiah says, if your prime is only 2-3 years, is that really good player? Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Everybody in the NFL would say yes. And by the way, it wasn't just 2 years. I feel like we're trying to diminish what Michael Thomas did to enforce a point. It wasn't just 2 years. It wasn't even just 3 years. Michael Thomas had 5 good years. I mean, like in total. I mean, even if you just said 4.5, like before when he came back and started off strong, it wasn't like he just had 2 years and then flashed in the pan and then played after that and just wasn't good, which has happened before. Like, you've had people who played like 7 years in the NFL and had one really good season. That wasn't what happened to Thomas. He literally was good for 4 straight years, made 2 straight All-Pros, made Offensive Player of the Year, 3 straight Pro Bowls, and then tragedy strikes. So I don't want to be disingenuous with the argument. If you want to pick Colston because of longevity, that's fine. I just don't want the whole like, oh, well, Colston was more talented, because he wasn't. But if you want to say, hey, he was healthier and lasted longer, you like him more, there you go. Have that conversation. You win that. Cool. Don says, you can say a lot about a lot of players, but I think it's more true for Colston than most. Colston had great hands, but he wasn't really elite at anything. That's true. Whereas Thomas was elite at multiple things, but Colston was just good. I think that's the best compliment I can give him, is he really was just good. And I think that's great. The fact that he is a 7th rounder, like if we want to talk story, that he's a 7th rounder that managed to put in, almost 10,000 yards. I mean, that's great. It's not, I mean, not 10,000 yards, but you know what I'm making. You know the point I'm making. The dude was good. He outshined expectations by a lot. Like, he went way beyond what people expected him to ever be. So that deserves credit. Absolutely. But his peak was nowhere near Thomas's peak. Like, Thomas never took a backseat. He basically kicked Brandon Cooks off the team as a rookie. Whereas Colston took a backseat to Jimmy Graham, and there was no debate over who was the primary receiver. It was Jimmy Graham. That's okay, though. He was an amazing player. It just depends on what you like. He says, fun fact, leading slant runner the year Thomas broke the record was not Michael Thomas, it was DJ Moore. Yeah, he caught that, and I've always said on this show, like, the film, and we even showed this, with Michael Thomas, his best route was not the slant, even though he did really well at the slant. His best route was the intermediate cross. Deep and intermediate crossing patterns is actually what Michael Thomas was the best at in the NFL. Like, that was his best route. Could he complete a slant and do amazing? Yeah, of course. And it was even always funny to me because, like, if you're going to argue slant boy, okay, well, if it's that easy, stop it. And they didn't. But his best route was a crossing pattern. That's what made him so damn good. So, yeah, I mean, either way, what do you do now if you're New Orleans? Y'all start looking at people in the draft. Y'all start looking at people in free agency who you want to add to this wide receiver room. Because as much as I love Chris Olave, he is not going to take over as your flanker that probably becomes your number one guy who starts playing the split end role. Like, he's not going to start lining up consistently on the line of scrimmage. He's not going to consistently start taking press hits from number one corners. Even though he'll take a number one corner, he's going to play off, right? So now you have to start addressing that position and put some competition there. Even if you're a fan of A.T. Perry, which I am, you don't bank a starting position on a guy who had flashes. Again, that's not an insult to A.T. Perry. It's just A.T. Perry is what he is. He is a high draft choice, as in high round draft choice, who had a couple of really good looks at the end of the year, but you do not bank an entire starting position on a guy who had 200 yards, right? Now, you hope you can continue to develop that, and you've seen them do that with some guys like Rashid Shaheed, who has continued to grow as a wide receiver and get better and made the All-Pro this past year as a special teamer. But, you know, he added, 250 receiving yards to his already good rookie year, doubled his TD numbers. Dude's good, right? We like that. We like what he provided because he became more than just a, 7 through 9 route runner. He was doing more than just, catching deep balls. So I love that he grew in his game, and hopefully AT does the same thing. But you definitely, now that you are acknowledging the era of Thomas is over, you have to address that spot. You have to address it. And there are ways to do that. Maybe you look at a veteran. Maybe you decide that you want to get a rookie. If you get a rookie, though, here's the thing. If you get a rookie, you're probably going to start the rookie. Like, if you invest high capital, like a first, second round pick, you just pushed A.T. Perry to the side. And right or wrong, NFL teams place more value on guys they put valuable draft picks in than guys that were late round draft picks or UDFAs. And they will definitely bench a guy or give him, rotational snaps if they go and get a guy in the second, first round, because they're going to be like, this guy's got to play. That's just what they're going to do. And a great example of New Orleans doing is that they literally did it last year. Trevor Penning. Like, I'm not saying that Trevor Penning shouldn't have been ready, because I do agree with everybody in chat. Trevor Penning should have been ready in his second year. But hell, the general manager said it himself. They put him out there too early. They threw him in there before he was ready. I 100% agree. Second year in the NFL, you're going through camp, you should be ready. But high round draft pick, you want to get him playing time, you want to try to get value for what you spent, you're going to throw him out there. Right? So if you are a fan of A.T. Perry, your hope is New Orleans hits the free agent market and gets a mid-tier or low-end wide receiver veteran to come in and fight for those snaps. And then now it's like, okay, in chat, who are some of the names that y'all want? Like, who are some of the big names at wide receiver that y'all go, okay, well, I want them to go take a look at this player, right? Maybe you want them to go take a look at, I'm trying to think of somebody who's older. There's a lot of like really interesting young wide receivers on the list, but trying to think like who is somebody that maybe, I like Curtis Samuel, but he's too close to what they already have. Marquise Brown is also already close to what they already have. Calvin Ridley also already too close. Really, like, I don't know if there really is that many veterans that fit the mold of what we're talking about just simply out there. But regardless, that's what we're talking about adding. So you want Calvin Ridley? Calvin Ridley doesn't really fit what the New Orleans Saints need. Calvin Ridley already is what they have. Calvin Ridley is Chris Olave. There's nothing wrong with that, but like he's not a Michael Thomas role. Now you could slot him in there if you feel like that he can do it, but that's not where he naturally fits. You know, he is a flanker, off-ball type of wide receiver, and I think that's where he can be elite. I don't think he's and I think last year you saw that, right? The Jaguars tried to do that, and I would argue it didn't work out that well. Y'all tell me, what do y'all think if y'all watched some of his games? I think he did okay, but I think there's a reason that his catch percentage was so low. I think there's a reason that he's available on the market, you know, and he is going to be turning 30. So, trying to see Justin Simmons. Don says DJ Shark, interesting. Tay says OBJ. I mean, OBJ definitely qualifies in terms of the veteran and a guy who's a number one. I have no problem with OBJ, but my thought is OBJ is a personality. And I don't know enough about OBJ in the past couple years, but do y'all think OBJ as a personality can come in and accept if he's the backup to A.T. Perry? Because OBJ's big thing the past couple years is getting back to being a top dog. I don't know if he can do the backseat thing. And I know in Baltimore, he wasn't exactly like 1,000-yard prime target, but you could tell that he was trying to be the guy. Like, can he do that? And if so, sure. I just feel like if part of your thing is personality, you're trading one personality for another. I don't know. I have nothing against it if OBJ comes in and kind of has an understanding that he's probably not going to be a primary guy, and he's actually supposed to come in as a mentor to help young receivers develop into that spot. And if y'all think that he can do that, absolutely. Absolutely. But I look at OBJ in a very similar way that I look at Michael Thomas, in that they are very passionate people, very emotional people, and that can lead you to being on both ends of that spectrum. And again, that's not a flaw on him as a person. I just don't know how much it fits specifically what New Orleans is looking for, or would be looking for in the case that we're, conjecturing on right now. But again, it's all about fit. And I'll be honest, just thinking about the names that are available, there aren't a ton of guys that make me go, okay, number one. KJ Osborne is a maybe, but he's a little undersized to be your starting split end. Tyler Boyd's been playing big slot his entire career. Can Tyler Boyd be your number one, knowing that Chris Olave is actually your number one? So basically, can Tyler Boyd be an effective split end, but not have to be the number one receiver? Because just because you don't have to be the number one receiver just because you're the split end. But you do have to fill a certain role. So can Tyler Boyd fill that role? Because he does have the measurables to play that spot, but he's never really been an elite player. That's okay if you think that he can fit that spot. I think he can maybe fit the spot. It's just how confident are you if you're looking at replacing your split end? Yeah. I think it's a good idea to consider. I think it's a fine idea. So, who would you trade for then? Nobody. I'll be completely honest. If I'm the New Orleans Saints, I am not trading for any player. I think you trade for players when you're in a position that you know that you can make a push. I am not confident enough in New Orleans' position to trade for players. You can trade for draft picks, but I don't feel like New Orleans needs to rebuild. But at the same time, I do not feel like New Orleans is in a position where they need to be acquiring players, because typically, if you're acquiring a player, you're the one losing the value side of it unless he pops off, right? Generally. Usually if you're trading for a good guy to be a starter, I guess you can trade for a guy to be a a backup. But like when New Orleans traded for Roby, they traded for him to be a starter. It just worked out that they didn't have to have him as a starter. But they literally gave up starter value in a trade. So if I'm the Saints, I don't want the Saints to trade for anybody in terms of that value. That's just me. Let's see. What do you think about Moody? I think Moody is a lot more Rashid Shaheed than he is Michael Thomas. And I feel like New Orleans already has a younger, better version of that. Now, when I say better, I do want to give Mooney credit to how statistically well he has performed. But, because he had a 1,000-yard season a couple years ago. But he, to me, is very much a Rashid Shaheed type of guy. And they already have that. I don't feel like he helps New Orleans. You can never have too many talented skill position players, but it doesn't help the main question that I brought up here, which is how do you replace the Michael Thomas presence if we're talking about bringing in a veteran split in? I don't think that answers the question. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't find a way to use him. I mean, you just brought in Kubiak. Kubiak's supposed to be able to do that. You give him weapons, but it doesn't answer your immediate question. Cody says Curtis Samuel has been used as a baby Debo for some relative success value. Hey, talking about fitting Kubiak? Maybe. The Cam Meredith one was bad. You had high hopes. I also had high hopes on Cam Meredith, and it just didn't work out. And that ended real rough, too. Because Cam Meredith came off a good year. Really good. I mean, he didn't have 2017, but 2016 Cam Meredith was like, okay, it's working. And then it clearly was gone when he came back into the league in 2018 with New Orleans. It was not there. So, yeah, was not there. Definitely see the vision. Definitely saw the vision, but sadly did not play out. Yeah, exactly, Mr. Don. He was a very talented player. The body just did not allow him to be talented. And he actually ended up being in the league for like 2 more years because New Orleans put him on IR, tried to work with him through 2019. They got rid of him, and then he actually went to New England with Bill Belichick and the Patriots. And they really tried to make it work. He actually went on the PUP list, if I remember, twice. And then it just never panned out. So they Chicago made a qualifying offer, refused to match it. New Orleans gets him, and it never worked out. And he actually was on IR before we went on IR, in November of that year? He went on IR, I think, in November for New Orleans. So he never even made it the season. Calvin says it's a weak free agency class. I would argue it's a weak free agency class for what New Orleans needs. If you need a playmaker, there are a lot of playmakers. Curtis Samuel, playmaker. Quality playmaker, in my opinion. Right? Gabe Davis, I think there's quality potential there, especially in terms of a playmaker. Marquise Brown, same thing. Right? Calvin Ridley, you can argue him as a number one. I'd rather have Boyd because I feel like Boyd's cheaper, does the same thing. But Darnell Mooney, you have playmaker-style wide receivers available, so if you're looking for a flanker or a slot, it's a good year. But if you're looking for what New Orleans is looking for, it's not a good year. It's not a good year. We do need to bring up Honey Badger real quick. Almost forgot about poor Honey Badger. But as you see on your screen for watching live, New Orleans have signed him to a 2-year deal. The biggest thing on this deal, 2 years worth $13 million, is it lowers his cap number this year from $12 million to $5.5 million. So giving New Orleans a little bit more space. If y'all are doing the tracking of where New Orleans is salary cap wise right now, they are now $17 million in the red. So they have made more adjustments, more re-signings, etc. They are $17 million in the red now. And Honey Badger's new contract pushes his void years to 2027. Now, y'all can determine whether y'all like that or dislike that. But he is now, quote unquote, on the books till 2027, even though he will not play until 20. I would be shocked if he plays until 2027. But his void years are pushed out quite a bit. but he is taking what I wouldn't necessarily call it a pay cut, but he is not going to be a top 10 paid player at his position. This puts him, I think, before the free agency period starts. So keep in mind, the ranking I'm about to give you is before free agency. But right now, he's the 13th highest paid safety in the league. 13th. And this is before you're about to have the safety market hit free agency next week with guys like Adoree Jackson and Chidobe Awuzie, which I guess you can put Awuzie as a corner, but he does both. But like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Xavier McKinney and Cameron Kurt and Julian Blackmon, much younger, very talented, probably going to get decent contract type of guys. Those are all probably going to get better contracts than Honey Badger. So by the end of 2 or 3 weeks from now, Honey Badger might be the 16th, 17th, or even 18th highest paid safety. So this is a very team-friendly move. Now, looking at it March 7th, you might go, wow, they're still paying him a lot, but that 13th is a little misleading because of when this contract is taking place. When you see the contracts after free agency is over, he's probably going to be getting a lot closer to 20 than he is 15. And again, I'm very curious to see where everybody goes. Now, there are some veteran safeties that are probably going to have less money than like Micah Hyde. I'd be very surprised if Micah Hyde has a bigger contract than Honey Badger. But yeah, there are several really nice safety names on the market, and CJ GJ is one of those. So now he's hitting the free agency market 2 years in a row in the middle of his career, and he's only 26 years old. Now, Detroit could bring him back, but he's definitely going to make more money than Honey Badger. And of the two safeties New Orleans had last year, who was the better safety? Honey Badger was the better in terms of positional play, even though you can definitely see some of Honey Badger's, like his elite athleticism that made him such a loved player at LSU has definitely started to wane. So McKinney's 6 years younger than Simmons and haven't reached his prime yet. Simmons' best years are behind him. And still, I think both of those might have more money deals than Honey Badgers. So I just wanted to point out that if you read in an article that he's the 13th highest paid guy right now, it is an accurate statement. But just keep in mind that it's coming a week before free agency unloads, and I'd be very surprised if that sustains. I would be very shocked if that sustains. I do feel like that is going to be something that changes here in the next week, and we're going to look at his contract and think that there's value there. So all right. I would say McKinney, but he's going to require a massive bag. Saints do have to figure out what they're going to do at safety. They do need to address it. And I would much rather they address it with a quality free agent and not a rookie. Rookie safety, I feel like, especially in Dennis Allen's system, is a tough transition. Now, you did have some decent safety play from a rookie last year, but I'm going to use the same logic that I just gave y'all for A.T. Perry. I'm going to use the same logic for safety. You do not just hand the keys to a guy who did pretty well. That was a rookie that did not start every game. That said, I really, 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 really do like what the New Orleans Saints were doing with guys like Howden on the field. So, maybe. I really do like guys like Howden, giving them a shot, But you definitely don't just bank on that. Right? And you did have some couple other veterans last year that, you can bring back who might be free agents and etc. Not necessarily everybody, but Honey Badger was, fun fact about Honey Badger, since we're talking about re-signing him, in terms of quarterback rating when targeted, he had the lowest quarterback rating when targeted by any of the Saints DBs. He actually had a better rating than Paulson Adebo. So, fun fact about him. I'm not saying that, he was a better coverage guy overall because he is a safety. Hard to compare safety versus corner. But, Honey Badger did really good last year, even though some of his eliteness is starting to leak out of the old tank there. But you do have guys like, again, a veteran in Jonathan Abram and, bringing in a rookie in Jordan Howden and deciding if you want to keep that. And maybe even a Daniel Sorensen, but that's not an answer long term. Anyway, I am very curious to see what they do. There are a lot of names. I would say the safety market, if you're New Orleans, looks a little bit more appetizing than the wide receiver market. But again, do you go after one big name or do you go after an example? A big name for me, Geno Stone. Geno Stone, who is very similar to Marcus Williams in terms of style of middle of the field, deep safety, rangy center fielder. I don't know how much he's going to cost. He's only 25. He's a proven veteran, but I don't necessarily consider him elite. Some people might not agree with that. I don't consider him elite. I think he was good. I think last year his interception numbers were quite inflated. Like, I don't think he was actually that good. I think he was very solid. Those interception numbers might drive his price up for some teams. But if you do want to go acquire somebody who wasn't that old or isn't that old, is going into his 5th season, so he's basically coming off a rookie contract. It'll be his first non-rookie contract. I think there's an option. You have a good veteran in Honey Badger. If you can get a decent price for Geno Stone, he's young, a piece that maybe you can build around. There you go. Just don't pay anybody top dollar like Jarvis Burt. And see, that's what I'm kind of at. Like, as long as Geno Stone, and the reason I don't think Geno Stone will be there is because Xavier McKinney is going to be the, probably the top guy. Cameron Kurt is very, very good. Even though his name doesn't get brought up as much, I do think that Cameron Curl is very, very good. I think CJGJ is going to have, CJ's tricky. There are going to be teams that don't want him at all because of the personality stuff. But there are going to be a lot of teams that don't deny his talent. So I think actually NFL.com had him as their number 1 safety on the market. Justin Simmons as a veteran's not going to get big dollar, but you do have Julian Blackmon, who is probably going to have a really good one. But his injury history might make some people wary. You also have Jordan Fuller, who is only like 26. So I don't think Geno Stone's going to be the top safety. I don't think he's going to be the top safety because I think there's other talented guys who I think are more talented. Like, I think Cameron Curl is more talented. I think McKinney is more talented. So Stone is a good, like, mid-tier safety that you go, hey, maybe they can work with that. And we talk about, can you elevate Derek Carr? If you bring in a mid-tier guy at DB, where we know Dennis Allen is good. Like, Dennis Allen is really good with DB rooms. He just is. He's really good with DB rooms. I feel like that's a great match. I feel like they can elevate him into being a very good free safety. And I don't think that makes him expensive, right? But again, this is just if I was creating a wish list. Now, I'm not a fan of Jeremy Chinn that much. Some people like him. I'm not really big on Jeremy Chinn, but he's also on the list. We'll see how that goes. Now, Jeremy Chinn, the reason I don't like him is he's much closer to Honey Badger than Marcus Williams or even Marcus May. He's much closer to Honey Badger. He's very much a get down in the box or play that robber role in a cover 1, cover 3. He's a lot closer to being a quasi linebacker / safety than he is being a deep field safety. So I actually wouldn't want the Saints to even look in his direction. Not because I don't think he's talented. I just don't feel like he fits what New Orleans is looking for. If you want a guy to kind of play as a robber and play as your heavy nickel safety and stuff like that, I think Jeremy Chinn is a very, very good fit for that role. I don't think that's what New Orleans is looking for. What's New Orleans looking for? Center fielder. So then I'm looking at guys like Geno Stone. That's a better center fielder. Also, you know something else like Geno Stone? Past 2 seasons. Guess how many games he's played? 34. That's one other reason I like Geno Stone. He's played 34 games the past 2 years. I like that. Now, he's only started 18 of those, but he was available the entire season. I'm a fan of that. That's a good one. That's good. I'm tired of guys who played like 11 really good games last year, but missed the rest of the season. He's played 34 games in 2 years. I like that. That actually drives his value up for me because I am so used to us getting guys like, hey, let me tell you about this Cameron Meredith guy who might be the greatest wide receiver you ever see if he's healed from this devastating injury. I'm kind of like, yeah, Peyton Turner looked really good on this one rep. Oh, he missed the rest of the season because he's hurt. Oh, yeah, that's kind of like, this man's played 34 games in 2 years. Like, look at me. Look me in the eye, chat. That's what New Orleans needs. That's what New Orleans needs. Again, I'm not even trying to say that he's the best safety on the market. I don't think he is. I really don't. I think Xavier McKinney is the best safety on the market, personally. Of free agents, I think Xavier's tops. But even if you go to like Xavier McKinney, has he played 34 games over the past 2 seasons? No, because 2022, he missed half the season. Now, he did have 2 seasons of the past 3, 17 games in a season, and last year he had a good season. So, sure, I think he's the best overall safety available. But in terms of fitting New Orleans, Geno Stone, I think, is a great mid-tier safety who has been healthy and fits New Orleans. Let's get it done. That's one of my names. I wanted Clint Kubiak as my main offensive coordinator, and now as my main safety pickup, I want Geno Stone. That's who I want. Hopefully the Ravens don't like re-sign him or anything. That's who I want. If you want to know another guy up there, Julian Blackmon is another good name in terms of like who's put up good tape. Julian Blackmon has put up good tape. He's still young, but he's never played a 17-game season. But in terms of fit, he had a good year last year, played 15 games, did miss a couple, 4 interceptions, plays the free safety spot well that New Orleans needs, has good athleticism for center field, and is 25. So he's still young, has years on him. So there are options there. And if you go by like New Orleans liking guys that potentially have bigger splash, that's potentially bigger splash. Another one, though, I'm very curious if New Orleans goes after him. I'm curious who all goes after him. Jordan Fuller is a very interesting name in the safety market. One thing I like about Jordan Fuller, he did play all of last year, only played 3 games in 2022. But Jordan Fuller is a team captain. Why does that matter to me? Because the New Orleans Saints are getting old. I'm not saying that any of the other names I mentioned aren't like quality individuals. But to be a team captain, you've got to be a special type of leader. Devin Fuller's brother, by the way. Jordan Fuller is 26. Like he just turned 26 like a week ago or something. So it's not like he's about to turn 27. He's 26. A very, very good, well-rounded safety. And he's a team leader. The reason I like that, though, is because the leaders of the New Orleans Saints defense are all 30+. Demario Davis, Cameron Jordan, and Honey Badger. So that's something that might have value when you think about building this team long-term and rebuilding, that top 5-ness. Because I think the Saints defense is top 10 still. They're not top 5 and elite. You do need to make sure that you find good leaders for your DB room. And Fuller's a leader. So there's you some good safety names who I think fit the team and can contribute, but you do have to factor in things like injuries. And one thing with skill position players, especially in the modern NFL, skill position players usually don't make it 17 games. They just don't. And that's all of them. Like, that's not even a unique to New Orleans thing. Skill positions just really struggle to make long-term contributions. They just do. So, yeah. But all 3 of the New Orleans Saints leaders are over 30. Josiah says Eddie Jackson, 1 year, 10, 12 million. I wouldn't. That's me. I wouldn't. I'd rather have Geno Stone. Here's why. The last time, I realize that Eddie Jackson's a well-known name, but a couple things. The last time he played a full season, 4 years ago. The last time he made an All-Pro, 2018. Not saying that Eddie Jackson is not a good player. Eddie Jackson is way past his prime. Much like Honey Badger. Still effective. But why would I do a 1 year, $12 million deal? I'm trying to find guys I can build with and build for. Why would I do 1 year, $12 million? If I'm building my roster, I want to look at guys like Fuller, 26-year-old team captain and talented. Geno Stone, 2 straight seasons, never missing a game, starter, 7 interceptions last year. That's what I'm looking at. Now, does Stone have the same upside as Eddie Jackson did at their career? Go back to the peak talent argument from earlier? No. But what do you want? What's the point of bringing in another 30-plus-year-old safety? To me. Charles says, Saints active with contracts. Who that? God bless. We do want to see the Saints active with contracts, and we do want to see this type of movement, and I do like to see them moving already. And Antonio did ask before, and I'm sorry, Antonio, for missing this. Should the Saints keep MT one more year? I'll be honest. As much as I love MT, no. I don't think they should. So anyway, I think that Eddie Jackson is a solid player, but when one of your biggest issues on defense is that your defense is aging to a point where they're not as good as they were, don't add to that problem. Find somebody that you believe can be with your team and good for 4 to 5 years. Robert, anybody you says anything you think fly under the radar, be a dime in the rough? For me, Geno Stone's an under the radar type of guy, and I'm mentioning him a lot because the reason I call him under the radar is because all the names that people are going to think of first: CJ GJ, Xavier McKinney, Cameron Curl, Julian Blackman, Jordan Fuller, Jordan Whitehead, probably going to get thought about before Geno Stone. So I think he's a little bit under the radar. There are definitely other people, though. Look at edge rushers, right? Everybody's going to be looking at Danielle Hunter, Jonathan Greenard, who I've already said I would love the New Orleans Saints to go after. Zadarius Smith, the veteran, is a veteran pass rusher. Doesn't have the same level of production, but still talented. Josh Uche. There's another one who maybe comes in. So you're under the radar. It's funny. One of the under the radar edge rushers I saw somebody else write about this week was Marcus Davenport. But if I had to name somebody, you can go like Dorrance Armstrong, who is somebody that not everybody is going to know because Armstrong has been playing like the third pass rusher role. So now everybody's going to really know Dorrance. He's been the Dallas Cowboys for the past couple years. Very, very similar to Carl Granderson. This is a guy who is not a full-time starter, but hasn't got an opportunity because there's better people in front of him. But over the past 2 years, he has a combined 16 sacks over the past 2 years as a rotational player. He has 6 starts in those past 2 years, and he's 26 years old, turning 27 some point this year. That's a pretty quality defensive line pickup that's under the radar, who's never gotten a chance to prove he can be a 10-sack guy. Like if you want to roll the dice on somebody, right there. Do you think we should release Cameron Jordan? Absolutely not. Would you not consider bringing Chauncey back? Not at all. Nope. 0. I would not. Nope. 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 Negative. Negatory. Nope. Not. Nope. Negative. Trade him at least. Best years are behind him. I mean, Cameron Jordan's best years as a pass rusher are behind him. Yes. Do not undervalue what he provides to this team, not just as a leader, because you don't keep a guy just because he's a leader. He is still an elite run defender, and that still matters. He's still an elite run defender. So I don't think that Cameron Jordan is a bad player. Cameron Jordan is still a very good player in the NFL. He's just no longer elite. You don't get rid of guys who are good. You get rid of guys who are no longer good. He's still good. He's just no longer elite. Now, we can gripe about his contract if you want to. That's a different conversation. But the thing is, if you traded him, nobody's taking the burden of his contract anyway. Like the pain points of his contract are stuck on New Orleans no matter what. Like some of his void years and stuff like that. That's not just going to magically go away because you trade him. So you don't get rid of Cameron Jordan until he stops being good. And Cameron's already said that he wants to retire in New Orleans. So it might be one of those things like if they threaten to trade him, he's like, look, I'll just quit. So you need an elite guy on the other side. But even if you need an elite guy to replace Cameron Jordan full time, that still doesn't mean you get rid of Cameron Jordan. It just means that you have Cameron Jordan, who's a very good defensive lineman, who's versatile, that you can move. And then you have another guy who's younger taking his place. You still keep him on the team. You don't get rid of him until he's not good anymore. Now, if you think he's not good, cool. But I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't really think that it wouldn't make sense financially to get rid of him because, one, your only backup right now to Cameron Jordan is Tano Passignon. And no offense, Tano, you are not Cameron Jordan. So let's see if Foskey and Turner can turn into something this year. Hopefully, maybe. But yeah. Would you go after Tony Pollard? I wouldn't. I'm curious if anybody in chat would. I wouldn't. But I've also been very clear that I don't believe in paying running backs. I'm one of those jerks. I go draft one in the third and fourth round, and as soon as they want to get paid, I say, deuces. But I'm a horrible person. I'm a bad individual. My heart is cold. I have darkness in my soul. I would never pay Tony Pollard. Absolutely not. Nope. Not that position. And I'm a terrible person, and I will say it on this podcast. And every running back out there, please feel free to cuss me out and tell me how terrible I am. Because I will admit, you know who gets the most yards and touchdowns for most teams? The running back. No, not paying him. Why? Logic is simple. Tony Pollard's coming into his 6th season. He's going to be 27 years old. You have to convince me, even though he was not the starter for the first 3 years because they had Ezekiel Elliott, you have to convince me that I can get 3 years of Tony Pollard, 1,300 yards, total yards, so yards from scrimmage, and a minimum of 7 TDs for 3 straight years. So I need a guarantee that I'm going to get 36, let's just say 4,000 total scrimmage yards and 20 touchdowns. If you can guarantee I get that from Tony Pollard, I'll sign him to a 3-year contract right now. You are now saying that you for certain can tell me a running back, 27, 28, 29 years old, is going to give me those 4,000 yards and those 20-plus touchdowns. And if you can guarantee that, I'll sign him to a deal. But I don't believe you can because that's just not what running back is. Because running back is super invaluable for you on the field but doesn't stay healthy. You do not see very many Frank Gores in existence, which is why people don't pay them. And that is awful for those players. It is. I won't deny that. Like, the way that they get that disrespect is terrible. And the way that I have proposed they fix that, I believe running backs should get paid more money up front. I really believe that. I think that's how you fix the problem. Because running back as a position is used more than other positions, I think that running back contracts and rookie contracts should be built upon their contribution. And I think they should get more money than other positions early in the career because of the age of how long they last and the injuries that they suffer. I think they should make more money. But I'm not paying them a second contract. I'm going to go get another one for first contract. I just would argue that that first contract should be more valuable. Can you believe they paid Daniel Jones and cut Barkley? Yeah. If you told me if I had to make the choice, and I almost cussed. I will trash talk Daniel Jones on this podcast all day long. All day long. If you told me my only option was I had to pay one of those two. Now keep in mind, I would never pay Daniel Jones. But if you told me my only 2 options were Daniel Jones or Saquon Barkley, I'm paying Daniel Jones. Now, I would never do that. But if you are the New York Giants and you're arguing that he's going to be a franchise quarterback and all this other bullcrap, and you told me I had to pick, who do I pick? I'm going to pick Daniel Jones, the quarterback, every time. I'm not picking Saquon Barkley, who literally got injured immediately as he got in the league and popped off and then got hurt. Second season, he did not play the full season. Third season, he was gone. And then he has not played a full season since, even though he has had elite moments. Absolutely, if I had to pick, I'd pay Daniel Jones. Even though I think Daniel Jones is worse than Derek Carr by a lot. So yeah. Paying Daniel Jones $40 million is beyond absurd. But if you told me, like, if I'm the New York general manager and I'm only going to pay one of them Daniel Jones is clearly the option. Would I give him $40 million? God, no. Please do not confuse me saying I wouldn't pay Saquon Barkley for me saying that I will gladly give Daniel Jones $40 million. But if you literally said the option is pay Barkley or pay Jones, I'm paying Jones because I'm going to get more value likely from my money. So, do you still believe in Foskey? Absolutely. I don't give up on a rookie after a rookie year, especially one that we knew needed development. Yeah, Tori says now the Giants are saying it's not off the board. They get rid of Jones. Yeah, I mean, I would have payer's remorse too, or buyer's remorse, whatever you want to call that. But, I mean, you still always choose the quarterback if you believe that this quarterback could potentially be a franchise quarterback. If that's what you really believe. And again, I wouldn't do it. But anyway, we've got an hour. I didn't even get to get into mock drafts, but I hope y'all have had a great time. I've had a great time. It's been very good conversation. Appreciate all the differing opinions out there. I think it's really good to have that discourse and be able to talk about these different things. I think that's really neat. So we'll do more of that on the next episode of Who Dat Confessional, which is this podcast. If you were wondering how you ended up here, it's because we love the New Orleans Pelicans and we love the New Orleans Saints. And the Pelicans are the more stable franchise right now, which is a little bit wild. But shout out to the Pellies. Please be consistent. Please keep up your current winning ways. I appreciate y'all. Like how they just absolutely destroyed Toronto the other night with Trick or Trey going up with 30-plus points. Beautiful. Why did I love that? Because Pelicans had gotten this really awful reputation for losing to bad teams. And they beat the piss out of Toronto. That's what you should do if you're a good team. You should beat the piss out of them and own their home court. Like New Orleans is superior to them in every facet of the game. And yet you can look at multiple games this season where they would lose that game. Right? Like, how about the fact that they lost to Memphis this year after Ja was gone? I know Ja Morant played like 2 games this year against the Pelicans and dominated, but losing to a Memphis team that is broken, right? But Memphis they don't have their best player. They're not going to make the playoffs. They've won like 20 games the entire year. They're like, 14th, 13th in the conference. Pels still lost to them. Like, that's the stupid stuff the Pelicans would do earlier in the season. And finally, they're not doing that. Finally, they're not doing that. But anyway, we got to wrap up. Hopefully, Pels keep us going. Who dat? God bless. I love every single one of y'all. Thank you for heading up the podcast. Check it out on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeart Radio. Deuces. We're out.